If you put opinion-based decision-making into Google, other search engines to apply, you get 1.58 billion search results. If you put fact-based decision-making into Google, you get 924 million. Now, according to Drucker, who apparently knows a little thing about management and consulting, opinions come first, facts come second. So who do you agree with? We're going to find out after we hear a little bit of music, just to get the old blood going here. And if I can go down here, folks, we're with you. Folks, we're back in the room here for a moment or two. Joe, I think it's due to my incompetence on using technology. I've actually temporarily lost Joe, but she'll be back with us in a few moments. And what we're going to do in the interim is to make this screen more presentable. So I hope everybody has had a wonderful week here. When Joe joins us again in a few moments, we are going to be talking about opinion-based decisions and fact-based decisions. And it looks all very weird, doesn't it, with that crazy screen layout there as well. Let's go look at that. That looks a bit more presentable. And we shall wait for Joe to come in. Just to give you a bit of an update information, if you want to, I'd love to hear your, well, we would love to hear your views on this topic here. Put hashtag replay into that wonderful box. Me and Joe will pick that up and actually answer your questions. And so, what's your own thought process before I dive into this? I want to dive into this with my friend and business partner, Joe. So we are going to just have a little intro talk there as well. So if you've got any thought processes yourself, any comments on that, as to which you gravitate to, then obviously please chuck them into the comments box. And what I'm going to do, me and tech probably don't go hand in hand together. One moment, just like that wonderful visual program, Joe is on the screen, and in the next breath, just almost like a puff of smoke, she disappeared. But she's in there somewhere, and she will be back with us. So let's have that old comms as well. The thing about a live broadcast, you can't actually pause it. And here we go, as if by magic, here she is. Joe,
hello.
I don't know what happened then.
I'm so sorry. It's just, I think as you press to go live, the internet crashed, and apparently it's been crashing locally all day. I don't know if, local school-age people are back at home. Now it's the summer holidays and they're playing on the Xbox and PlayStation and all of those things.
Well, you'd be pleased to know that I took the blame for it, by the way, saying that you are excused from any responsibility. But
well, I've quickly come out, put my dongle on, and I'm on a different network. So I'm so sorry, everybody. What have I missed? What have I?
Well, what I did, I told everybody that we weren't going to start the show. We're going to be talking about opinion-based decision-making, fact-based decision-making. So leave the requisite comments in the hashtag replay comments box. We'll pick them up. And really, now that you're back with us, we're going to carry on that conversation. We came up with it last week, folks. And by the way, in continuation, we found that what works really well to have a good balanced conversation between the two of us and the rest of the audience is not to actually know what each other's going to be talking about. So I have no idea. It's quite interesting that we tend to differ on some things, but we tend to sort of pretty much have similar approaches. So we had that stat by Google, 1.58 billion It's 1.58 billion searches against 924 million. Now, received wisdom is that facts go first. Drucker, spoiler alert, which I tend to agree with, says opinions come first. Joe, what's your thoughts on that one?
Opinions, yes. Oh, that's so loaded, isn't it?
It is.
No, I don't think you've loaded it. I think the concept of opinions is loaded, because when you sort of think about what is an opinion and start to unpack that, I mean, let's just start to play around with defining an opinion. And for those of you watching and listening from wherever you are, how would you define the word opinion without just looking it up in a dictionary? What does it mean to you? Because how do we get our opinions? It's from stuff we've learned, experiences, beliefs, emotion, perception, the stories we want to tell ourselves, the stories, we tell ourselves about other people. Opinions is a really loaded word, isn't it?
Very much. I mean, you're quite right. And then there are actually psychological models that follow that, your description there as well. And opinions, beliefs, they tend to be recognised as not based on facts. But I think in terms of if you've got like from learned behaviour, from experiences here, those would have been based on some occurrence there as well. So that in itself is a factual thing. And I think fact nowadays, certainly with the plethora of the internet and so much information out there, I think fact has to be treated very cautiously. And I think it's always based on, I used to think when I was growing up that fact is fact, it's like black and white. But for me, I think it's based on the best information we have at that time and what our perception and paradigms are actually set out to be.
Yeah, because also what is a fact and what do we absolutely know for sure? And actually, when it's getting very, very philosophical now, but when we boil it down, we don't really know anything for sure, do we?
Not at all. Not at all. I think we can base judgments on. So for me, I suppose I would draw that distinction between saying a fact-based decision. I think there are two things about it. First of all, received wisdom says you go for the facts and then you base a decision on that. I like the opinions-based judgment here because it says you don't disband and dismiss factual information or evidence, but it's what goes first, what leads the conversation, what leads to the decision making. But you're right. I mean, I think facts are facts as we know them as of now. 5 years, 10 years time, something could revolutionise our way of thinking of things.
It may change. It's like, and Rosemary Connolly, Rosemary Connolly, I think she's from Leicestershire, actually. She's from your neck of the woods. Yeah, lovely lady. And she went bust because the low-fat diet was the way forward. And, and what do people put in diet food to give it more taste? Sugar and salt. And now, of course, the view is that too much sugar isn't great for us either. She's saying low fat will come back, but she went bust because the facts changed, based on latest research and so on. And we're learning stuff all the time, aren't we? So I think you're right. The facts are the things, the latest view, the best that we know right now, based on some data, some research, some insights. And then opinions, really, I think opinions should be about what we decide to do about those facts or with those, how we choose to act on them. What's the best course of action?
Interesting. I think in the context of decision making, when we were talking about having this topic here, in the context of decision making for your next big win, management decision making, I think why I gravitate towards Drucker's perception and way of looking at it is to say that, and there's a famous quote I got from Ford somewhere from Alfred Sloan, is about when you look at your next big win, when you look at something that's not just an operational matter here, what you want is people's opinions coming forward. You want disagreement. You want that tension coming out, because then you frame a hypothesis and then you go and look for the evidence to clarify which is the direction going forward here. So actually a consensual meeting, when you're looking to be in this is more your field, to be more innovative and come up with something different, is what you're actually after. You don't actually want consensus to say. Received wisdom says this is our strategy. Received wisdom says we should do X, Y, and Z. You need to actually stick your neck out and come up with an opinion.
Yeah, and I think you need diverse opinions. So it's about maybe having a wild card in there and people who are going to shake things up, and some different perspectives. So, and people who are experiencing and seeing things from different angles. I think that's really, really important. And then you can sort of work together to shape that and collaborate on it. I think it's really interesting what you say about hypothesis, because sometimes we can use facts to arrive at a hypothesis that we might then want to test. So we could say, market research data shows that we're all, I don't know, or Google Trends says that we're all doing, looking this thing up on the internet or whatever. And then, okay, well, that generates an idea, but we still need to go and test that idea. So I think there's a constant, we can start with an idea and then go backwards and test it. There's a constant, it's an iterative thing, isn't it? It goes round and round, I think.
Agreed. I think from this, I think it's definitely is not one thing in the exclusion of the other. For me, I think it's probably more of an order of doing these things here, because it's about you have a hypothesis, you have an opinion, you say this is going to be work, this is going to shake things up, going in that direction, and then you go and find and look and evaluate the evidence to support or to discredit the hypothesis you come up with, which I suppose is pretty much what science is about, isn't it? So in the world of science, that's what should happen. You should postulate a frame, a hypothesis, and then do the testing to validate or deny it.
Yeah, and in fact, that's how my own PhD thesis was. I did a statistical PhD on innovation and entrepreneurship performance, and I had a number of hypotheses. So essentially what I did, what I think a lot of I don't think this is special to me, by the way, but you read a lot of stuff and you decide what hypotheses you're going to come up with, because it's all about an original contribution to knowledge. So you have to see what's out there, then find some unexplored areas, create hypotheses about them, and then go and look at how you can test those hypotheses through talking to people, surveys, data, all those things. So and then sometimes you find out that you knew even less than you did before you started, which is very interesting.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I would imagine then for your PhD, I don't know, is that actually not actually putting a hypothesis forward and then suddenly finding out that hypothesis wasn't correct. That's actually as valid as actually saying this is my hypothesis and there's the proof, because the whole structured approach that you do with literature review, evaluating things is as valuable, because you learn things from what doesn't support your original idea or doesn't support your original hypothesis there. So I think they definitely go hand in hand. I don't think you can have one to the exclusion of the other, because I think you picked up before, if we're basing things on our learned experiences, if we're basing things here, what we have to be careful with though is the bias that creeps in there, and our previous experiences could be slightly flawed, our recollection of them maybe not as clear cut as we'd like to, and that's why it shouldn't be one to the exclusion of the other.
Yeah, I think and an experience is an experience, but it doesn't mean that you'll have that experience again every time over. So for instance, somebody said to me, that an individual really doesn't like consultants because they're worried that consultants are going to go over their head and, do X, Y, and Z. Well, I asked why, and there was one bad experience with one consultant who did that. And that's one person in so very many. It's like somebody taking on a member of staff and having a really bad experience with that member of staff, but I'm never employing anybody ever again. It's really about learning from that experience and thinking, what could we have done differently? Sometimes it's something, sometimes there's not a lot, but people are people, and then whatever it is, and then learning from it and going again, and not putting too much weight on previous experiences repeating themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's interesting you say that, because in the sense that we can easily sometimes, when we're very strong and dogmatic in our opinion on something, we want to go in a particular direction. We can find facts to fit the argument. We can find facts and reshape them and reframe to prove that validity here. And I think certainly for something like a next big win, whatever that next big win is, you do need strong people. You do need people who are willing to contribute, to be challenged and to challenge there as well. You need to try and leave the ego at the door not be fixated on your opinion. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be strong and certain about what you're doing, but ultimately you've got to stand. It's got to be subject to scrutiny as well.
Yeah, and I think it's about firstly dropping the idea that you have to be right about your next big win, and doing the thing, approaching it like the scientific method, which is, I've got a hypothesis, this is going to be absolutely amazing, it's going to be awesome, it's really going to work, but let's test it. And if you test it and it's not looking as good as you thought, you might need to do something different, think again, do more work on it before you go live. There might be some more stuff to do. And I think as well, what I'm saying about experience is that just because something failed before, or it felt uncomfortable, or it didn't work for you before, it doesn't mean that will be the case again, as long as you look at the lessons learned. So that will never work. We tried automating our processes. We tried putting all that paper-based stuff onto computer. We tried to win that big client, and it was awful. So don't be put off. Analyze it, look at it, and then think, okay, it's in fact, because we make some very expensive mistakes if we don't get the return on investment via learning.
I think it's interesting because I think that this is where the human brain, is actually more of an impact and presence, and the emotion is more impactful than the logic bit. Because I think there's an element of, I think anybody who's been in business, anybody who's been involved in decision making, if you don't make a big cock up or mess up at some point in your career, then you're not doing it right. I've made quite a number of them, but I think it's that sometimes I've seen it is the ego, that negative impact from not succeeding, from failure, can subsume it, and that actually restricts us and stops us. And we actually see that as, that's it, the doors come down, we're never going to try it again, as opposed to saying, lick your wounds, look back, and what is it you can learn from that you can try and put right going forward there as well.
I think that's so true. This is years ago, probably 2016, 17. I had my first foray really into online products and online campaigning for products, and I got some very expensive advice. Who's supposed to be, a really good expert in her field, and she was very good at doing, I'm sure doing what she was doing for herself. But despite the guru-ness and the guru marketing that she put around herself, actually there was no substance behind it. And I ended up, I did learn some things. I got some new skills, but I was really quite badly burned in terms of the financial impact, and also took a bit of a confidence knock, to be honest. But what do? You've got to, I think, take what you can from that. So secondly, I have learned that there's some questions I ask people now, and I'm much better at seeing through the apparent guru facade, and I'm more challenging around the substance with people. But I used the new skills, and I realised I needed to develop some other skills that I didn't have initially, and it's got it's come on leaps and bounds from there. But if I hadn't had that first bad experience, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that could have, that's a bad experience there. We've all had probably faced very similar different scenarios. Is if you didn't have that, you could be getting to a situation where you then make a big decision. You haven't learned from that, facade shifting or whatever you want to call that. And at that point, you're going to get your fingers burnt, and the impact could be even more devastating.
Yes, yeah. And, they're all our experiences are things we can use as a stepping stone for growth, for growth mindset, really. So it's interesting, this balance between opinion and facts. And I think also that brings me on to something else, which is we ought to challenge people sometimes when they present something as a fact. And you've used an expression a few times, which is received wisdom. And often received wisdom, it's folklore, isn't it? It's just mythology that's passed down from person to person, and we come to believe it's true, and it isn't always.
Absolutely. And received wisdom, though, Jason, it's not just that, and that's very true, but I think it's also based on who the person is, what their supposed standing is, what their background is, their qualifications. So, for example, in my own space, in the world of business, finance, tax, and all that stuff. I've met lots of people who are on paper very qualified and experienced, and they've given atrocious advice and decisions, or certain people have suffered as a result. Well, I mean, obviously, this is not the platform to do that. And I've seen very unqualified but very experienced individuals give very good, solid advice. And I'm sure in your space you must have met very similar supposed experts. Basically, it's just like the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we need to think about this when an employee tells us something is working or isn't working. And it obviously depends who it is, how long they've been with us, and their track record of trustworthiness and all those things. But explore that a bit. Is that right or not? So they're doing everything they could be doing. If a supplier promises us great results, we need to dig into that. And if they tell us that, particularly around digital marketing and those sorts of areas, if they say they're getting great results for us, well, show us. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I always say it's the due diligence bit. And due diligence isn't just about when you buy something. It's not about documentation. It's about somebody says something. What's the basis? There's no harm, I think, in just testing and validating what they're saying and how much substance there is to that. This is bit I think I'm misquoted by that. It wasn't Ford. It was General Motors. Alfred Sloan, apparently at a meeting, I'm going to quote this because I'll never forget some of it. Apparently at a meeting, he had all his senior executives unanimously support a decision, if I can pronounce it. And he said, I propose we postpone further discussion of this matter until our next meeting to give us time to develop disagreement, perhaps gain some understanding of what the decision is all about, which I thought was a pretty good, insightful quote.
Yeah, so he's challenging groupthink there, and it's interesting. Groupthink, of course, is when we all agree, and particularly when this is a bit back to opinion, right, and received wisdom. If we surround ourselves with people who think like us, then we're going to get answers that match what we think anyway, and sort of that's very nice and very comfortable. But where's the value in that? It's useful to have people who don't think like us and make sure we've got, like Sloan had, the diversity of perspective in the group. Because also what happens with groupthink, and again, this is sort of supported by psychological research. Don't take it as fact. Go and ask more and find out more about it. But when we're with people who have similar traits, the whole group becomes more that way. Let me explain. So let's say we are, I don't think we are particularly, but let's say we are very risk averse. We're in a team of people and everybody's pretty, tending towards risk aversion. What happens is, as a group, we become even more risk averse collectively than we would be individually, if that makes sense. Or if we were at the other end of the spectrum, really gung-ho about our decisions and giving everything a go, then we sort of egg each other on and become more gung-ho as a group than we might be individually. So when we're with groups of similar people, it intensifies those qualities and makes them stronger than we would be, than they are when we're individuals. Did that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I've heard very similar things in terms of taking it out of a business environment. There's two things that come from that. One, there's no merit in having an echo chamber. So if you're just merely talking to a group of people who merely represent and reflect you, and that's what you're hearing about, that's no good, in my opinion. The second thing, I remember a psychology experiment we done quite a number of years ago, where effectively you had a group of individuals. They were all given, I think, cups of tea, and one person was given a cup of coffee. Okay. And the group was basically asked, "Are you all enjoying your cups of tea?" And this person said, "It's coffee." And he said, no, it isn't. And basically, because everybody in that group was saying it's tea, they eventually managed to convince that one individual that, in fact, what they were drinking was actually tea and not coffee. So that power of group thinking, is very powerful.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's really interesting. And I think, when we're thinking about what are facts and what are opinions, what I hear a lot from businesses is, that businesses will ask customers about stuff, and customers respond. And if they don't like the answer, they go, well, that's just them giving their opinion. Well, it's the customer opinion that if they're your target customer, it's that matters, isn't it? So just because the customer's opinion is different from yours, if you want that customer to buy from you, don't we need to listen to that opinion, even if it differs from ours?
100%. I mean, I think, taking aside that the question may not be framed in the right way, you're absolutely correct there. If you're not prepared to get to hear the answer, don't ask the question.
Yes, yeah. And so this is the thing I see a lot of entrepreneurs do, is they seek evidence to support their hypothesis for what they think is great for their next big win. And then when they don't like the answers, they're sort of quite dismissive, instead of sort of digging in and doing more understanding. And I think entrepreneurs, we need to be a bit like that. Otherwise, we wouldn't, cut through the noise and make things happen and stick with it and all of that sort of stuff. There are always naysayers. But at the same time, I think it's about being clear which opinions we do need, do matter.
So I think coming from that, though, Joe, I think it's 2 or 3 interesting things. I think this is a topic for another show, about the impact that organisational culture and personal culture plays on how we interact, how we make decisions as well. So whether in terms of styles of leadership and all the rest of it, and obviously subtle hint there, we have got a very great quiz on leadership styles on the website. But I think leadership styles, how we conduct things here, has a great impact in terms of not just decision making, but risk, in terms of how governance is carried out, in terms of how people are liberated or not liberated, as the case is itself. So I think actually that we just actually tapped into a topic area that we need to discuss on future shows here about leadership styles and about culture.
I think what you're saying there, Mahmood, is I went a bit off-piste.
No, not at all, not at all. Because the thing is, when we started talking about this, about evidence and fact, the more we get into it, the more we talk about it now, the more the background work we've done. It says actually, it's not a linear thing. It's not just fact versus opinion. It's about, for me, what goes first. How should a decision be made? And ultimately, it comes down to the owner, somebody who's got that vision, and saying, "This is what I think we should do. Let's go now and actually just see if I'm off-piste completely, or should any substance." And if you don't give people that chance to input, that if you've got a toxic culture that says, "I'm not listening to you because I'm the boss," then that way lies ruination.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, so the other thing that came to mind as you were saying that is the impact that pace has on decision making. And when you've got to move really quickly, or even if you don't have to, but you perceive that you have to, right? You've got that sense of urgency about you. Then a lot more of that stuff is going to be based on opinion, isn't it? You're going to be quickly scanning
100%.
The facts and the data and the evidence, but a sort of quick absorption of that, and then moving and and having to take fast action. And often it's repeated, isn't it, in organisations, particularly when things are changing as much as they have been over the recent years.
100%. And I remember when we first started speaking, or going back as far back as 2020, for example, in that whole thing, lockdown thing, about as things were unwrapping very, very quickly, people had to pivot very quickly. I know you dived in, you did some tremendous work there in terms of helping business owners, in terms of sort of manage that transition, sort of technology advances being brought forward here. That was very much that you had to act quickly, and your opinion, whether you want to call it gut feel, based on experiences, based on behavior, knowing your customer and all the rest of it, meant you had to act very nimbly. And if you purely waited for the facts, you would be very much behind the curve.
Yeah, and you were amazing as well, and that's one of the reasons we connected at that time, isn't it? Because you were you jumped forward and were helping businesses online, giving advice and updates live on what the Chancellor had said and the latest updates for business and what that meant and how to get that support. So that was really you were amazing, and I think. But that's it. You've got to go forward with the best information you can, and sometimes it is about jumping. And I think I see a lot of stuff. I see a lot of businesses hover around. Yeah, at some point in the future, we'll become more sustainable, right? Or yeah, we will get automated. We'll do a lot more online, and but we're going to hang around and see what happens, because technology is moving so quickly. I generally and genuinely think that I get the sense sometimes that in business we're waiting for the answers to become clear, for things to settle down, things to feel a bit more normal. Then we'll get the answers, then we can make the decisions and we can move forward. And I don't think that magic moment is going to come where we get this clarity and all our, and the path forward is open for us. It's today's entrepreneurial leadership skill is to be constantly making decisions with all this uncertainty and with all this pace.
You're right. Do you know what it makes me think? That sort of what you just said there makes me think about the lion and the antelope parable. The story about that every morning when the antelope gets up, it knows that it has to run very fast if it's going to outpace the lion and survive. And every morning when the lion wakes up, it knows that it must kill something if it's going to survive, etc. So whether you're a lion or an antelope, you just know when that sun rises, you better be running.
Yeah, and I think if and I'm sure, because I think if people, if you're listening or watching this, you're not one of these, but the businesses that think they've got it all sorted, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing, it's all going to be fine, head down, bum up. We need to really challenge that and get comfortable making uncomfortable decisions at pace based on the best information we have at the time.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So this conversation just got accelerated so quickly. We're just coming up to the end of time. So what's the one takeaway for you, Jo, from what you would shout out there for business owners?
So I think, based on what we've said, facts and opinions are opposite ends of a continuum, and actually they merge and cross over, and we need both, because the facts aren't going to make the decisions for us. The opinions are what are going to lead to the decisions, but to make good decisions, we need to try and get enough evidence, if not all the answers. We'll never get complete clarity, but it's about getting good enough clarity to move.
Yeah, I love that. I would say don't dismiss opinions, and actually I'm not talking about operational change, I'm talking about the big decisions you want to make, is stick your neck out, encourage other people to vocalize their opinion and create that environment here. An actual disagreement is actually a good thing. If it's not negative, if it's not just there to be objectionable, but it's actually constructive disagreement, and you can encourage that conversation and debate, don't be afraid of having that debate, because therein lies nuggets of gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said.
So, folks, listen, what do you agree with this? And obviously, we won't talk to you if you disagree with this completely. But on a serious note, let us know what you think. Put your comments in the #replay comment box. We'll pick that up. Please do check out the leadership survey questionnaire on thenextbigwin.co.uk. And until next time, either be a lion or be a gazelle, but just make sure you keep running.
Yeah. See you then.
See you then.